and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm in the midst of one of the most momentous weeks in the history of the LGBT movement, no kidding.
I'm Ann Northrup, and I completely agree. So we will spend a significant amount of time going over the latest developments in Indiana and explaining the background of it to you in greater depth and, I hope, sophistication than most news outlets have done.
And that will take a while, but if you stay tuned, we will get to telling you who the two attorneys are who are going to argue our side in the Supreme Court marriage cases.
We'll also tell you about a fascinating vote in the United States Senate that brought not only all the Democrats, but a significant number of Republicans onto our side in a sort of test vote on same-sex marriage issues.
With any luck, we're going to show you a wonderful videotape of Mayor Anise Parker of Houston and her family. And if we don't get that on the air, you get on our email list and you can get the link to it.
So write to andyhum@aol.com to make sure you get that. The U.S. Department of Justice has sued an Oklahoma college for transgender discrimination.
Fortune magazine has named an out gay man as the world's greatest leader. No kidding.
Andy will be reviewing the revival of the Heidi Chronicles on Broadway, starring Elizabeth Moss of Mad Men, which starts again this week?
Yes, this weekend, on April the 5th, Easter Sunday. Yeah. And I won't be here next week. Chris Cooper will be filling in.
And in 2 weeks, Mike Signorelli, author of the new book, It's Not Over, will be here as a guest. Right. But is it over?
Well, what a week. You've all seen a lot of the news, and we're going to try to sort that out about what happened in Indiana over this Religious Freedom Restoration Act, the worst version of it in the country.
Yes, they've evolved this very nicely. Now, we are taping on Wednesday, April 1st, no fools. And as we are taping, we're getting bulletins as we sit here that say a compromise is in the works in Indiana. They may be doing something that actually says that you cannot use this law as a defense for discriminating against LGBT people in public accommodations. But none of that is final yet, and the right is certainly kicking and screaming about this. So you will know more about the latest details when you see this than we do. And similarly, in Arkansas, there is a bill on Governor Asa Hutchinson's desk that is very like the Indiana bill, but he is saying he wants that recalled and rewritten because we don't discriminate in Arkansas.
This from the state that passed a law that says none of our localities can go beyond what we do on the state level, meaning all the gay rights laws in the state could be wiped out.
Yes. So all of this is in flux, and as you have seen, this has become a real turning point in this country around the conversation about civil rights for LGBT people.
Well, it all stems from the fact that we have been winning on marriage in the courts, and it's going nationwide, and the right wing is looking for something to do to us to stop us from being equal members of society.
A couple things. First, people in our camp have complained for years about the focus on marriage. Why do we have to talk about marriage? That's so conservative. Why do we have to focus on that? And the answer, as we have tried to explain on this show, is that it's not about marriage. Marriage is simply the marker for establishing equality, civil rights, and it's the vehicle that the grassroots created by saying we want our rights, and this is one that we want.
But I would also say what we are learning is that getting marriage rights doesn't mean that you get protection of all of your civil rights.
Never thought it would.
And we've only got about half the country covered by laws that protect us on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity from discrimination, and we don't have a federal law. We're starting to get some good court decisions that are protecting us, but we have a long way to go there.
And ironically,
it's not over, as Mike Signorelli would say.
Well, ironically, these religious freedom laws are being passed in states that have no statewide protections for LGBT people in the first place. Some would say they're not even necessary, and that the right wing could have been discriminating against us all along without any problem.
But they like to rub it in. And some of these, in addition to religious freedom laws, part of what they want to do is, get clerks off the hook from having to do same-sex marriages. That's part of their religious protection, and that happened in Utah already.
And they have lost a few cases on florists or wedding photographers or bakeries, but those were all in states that had LGBT non-discrimination protections in place.
Right, and of course, yes, we are fighting the Religious Freedom Restoration Act as written in Indiana, but it's also gotten sort of invigorated our side and in Arkansas to say we want full protections under the law.
Invigorated our side. It's invigorated the entire corporate structure of the United States. Many of the politicians, activists all over the country, and mom and pop everywhere. So I want to go back a little, because a lot of the defense of this from Governor Pence of Indiana and the right-wingers and everybody else has been, well, I don't know what you're talking about. This is exactly the same law that Bill Clinton signed in 1993 and that Barack Obama supported in Illinois when he was a state senator there, and there are 20 other states that have the same law. What is your problem? Why are you upset? We've been doing this for years.
And you are going to explain what that is. But
yes.
What's troubled me is that the media has repeated that as if, well, this has just been around in 20 states, so I don't know, and why aren't the gays going after them? Why aren't they going after Obama and Clinton and all that stuff? But they're extremely different.
Yes, and I see little pieces here and there, bits and pieces of explanation, but it is our job as Gay USA to be a little more coherent and organized about this.
Go to the Lambda Legal website, because they've been writing great articles explaining what the difference is and why the Indiana law was the worst that's ever been passed in this regard, mainly because it's not about stopping the government from infringing on your religious liberty. It's about anybody in any private business or anything like that discriminating.
Any individual. So I want to go into the Wayback Machine for a minute to 1993 and the law that was passed on the federal level, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which, by the way, has been used badly, but was started with good purposes. And it specifically had to do with a Native American man who had been fired from his job and prevented from collecting unemployment benefits because he was found to be using peyote in a religious ceremony in his Native American practice of his religion. And the Congress, the government looked at this and said, well, you can't stop this guy from doing that as part of his religious practice. That's discrimination.
They didn't even stop Catholics from using wine in communion ceremonies during Prohibition.
There's a good analogy. Catholics can use wine, but Native Americans couldn't use peyote. So the government passed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and it was meant to protect people like this guy or like minority religious people who wanted to grow a beard. That was part of their religious practice, but they had jobs that supposedly forbade it. Or Sikhs who wanted to wear turbans in jobs that were not wanting to let them do that. It was all about protecting the rights of minority religious people against intrusion by the government.
I'm for that.
And it included a clause that said, unless the government can prove a compelling interest in outlawing this kind of behavior.
Right, because in combat you might have to wear certain things or cut certain things in a way that would go along with military discipline or safety. The government had the opportunity to prove that, but the whole impetus for the law was to protect the rights of individuals who were practicing their own religious practices, not hurting anyone else, not discriminating against anyone else. It was all about their own individual religious practices that were allowed to take place if they didn't interfere with
other people or other more important government actions. So that was passed. That's the Clinton law they're talking about.
And that's what passed in most of the 20 states.
Yes, and that had nothing to do with discrimination or going after people.
Which is why that Governor Mike Pence is such a liar, because he keeps repeating that it's just like these other things.
Yes, so that is why the Democratic minority leader in the Indiana Senate went on TV and called him a liar. So then a couple of other things happened. Then the Hobby Lobby decision came down more recently in the last, year or two from the Supreme Court. And that was a vast expansion of these religious rights. For the first time, the Supreme Court said not only do individuals have these religious rights to practice their religion as long as they don't interfere with a compelling government reason, but a corporation, a for-profit corporation, has the right to assert a religious belief that, in the Hobby Lobby case, means they don't have to pay for their female employees' contraception.
As Governor Romney would say, corporations are people, my friend.
Well, I would agree with him that corporations are owned and run by people, which I think is what he meant.
And in Hobby Lobby, they tried to restrict it to closely held corporations. And they said
but we knew they were opening the door.
It would not override human rights laws.
Yes.
But but the case was based on what I would call sex discrimination.
Exactly.
And they let it go.
Exactly. So even though they did say that, it was clearly opening a door. So then the next thing that happens is all these court decisions are coming down legalizing same-sex marriage, overturning the bans in states, overturning the DOMA section that said the federal government didn't have to recognize same-sex marriages legally performed in states. And the right wing got together and said, wait a minute, we have to, now it's our turn in this leapfrog battle. What's our next move going to be? This is a chess game. We won this move, then they won that move. Now what do we do next? So people like The Gathering got together, and the ALEC Fund people, and the American Family Association, and all these right-wing groups got together and said, all right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this Hobby Lobby decision and these Religious Freedom Restoration Acts. We're going to mash this all up and put it together. We're going to start passing religious freedom acts that are broader than this original 93 Clinton Act and the state acts that Barack Obama supported that were about just protecting individual liberty. And we've seen that we're losing these florist and bakery and photographer cases. And we are going to push the boundaries. We're going to do this much more broadly. And we're going to make it okay for not only individuals, but privately owned businesses, public accommodations, nonprofit organizations, everybody to do whatever the heck they want, simply by asserting a religious feeling. And this could go as far as, my religion says I don't have to obey traffic laws.
Right. Well, they have said things about it, doesn't affect the criminal law.
And that, again, the reason the right wing keeps saying, gay people aren't in this law. What are you so upset about? Because what the law does is provide a defense for anyone who asserts a religious opinion. Because
that is what it was all about. If you look at the legislative history on this, it is all about hurting gay people. I think we should show them the picture of Governor Mike Pence signing this bill in private. There was no official photographer there, but they got a picture of the ceremony there.
Yes.
And there it is.
It was closed to the press. This picture was leaked.
And when he was asked, who are those people standing behind you, he wouldn't say. And they were from some of the most right-wing religious groups, anti-gay groups in the world. That's who was there with him signing the bill.
All right, one of them is Eric Miller. Oh, wait a second, I want to first. Micah Clark of the American Family Association, who has said, let's put that picture up again. See, you have some nuns and religious people on the outside fringes.
Nuns don't dress like that for the most part anymore.
Well, whatever.
And you've got some Hasidim, and you've got...
But the white men behind, right around the governor...
I'm sorry, I said Hasidim. That guy's just an Orthodox Jew with the hat,
the white men directly behind and next to the governor are representatives of the American Family Association, the the Indiana Family Institute, Advance America. These are the guys who wrote the bill. That's why they're standing right around Pence. And they're the ones who, if you go into their record, have said homosexuality is a perversion, it should be changed, nobody should have any legal protections if they're gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. They have a long history, and they are furious right now that this national firestorm is happening, and they are digging in their heels and trying to prevent any compromise, any non-discrimination laws. These are the guys who are behind all this.
It is an extremely right-wing legislature. We have mostly right-wing legislatures in this whole country right now because of the Koch brothers who purchased them, even in states that Barack Obama won. There are right-wing legislatures. New York State has a right-wing Senate. Yes. Republican Senate.
But it is because, don't think these things sprung up out of nowhere. This is a vast right-wing conspiracy. They do get together in national meetings. They do put billions of dollars into these races, and they are out to deliberately take over these legislatures and pass these laws.
And quite frankly, I'll say something else. The Koch brothers could give a damn about the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, but they are the ones who elect these people, these right-wingers, because they're gonna keep their taxes low and they're gonna keep their businesses, from being impinged upon, and their oil, pollute the atmosphere and all that other kind of stuff. So in some senses, nationally, this is a sideshow for them that's keeping us all distracted from what they want to do, which is to destroy the economy of this country and keep everybody, slaves to them. And I'm not exaggerating.
But meanwhile, the governor of Indiana is lying when he says that he never thought this bill would be used to discriminate. The right-wingers are standing firm against any kind of backtracking on this law. And if we manage to beat back these laws and actually pass non-discrimination
their heads will explode.
Their heads will explode, and it will be over their proverbial dead bodies, and it will be the highest irony because they really went after this thinking they were going to really smash us. And the backlash they have encountered is, first of all, completely unexpected by us, I would say, at this level.
Did you expect it, Governor? Heavens no, he said.
Well, I have to sidebar my favorite statement by him in a Wall Street Journal op-ed where he said, discrimination, if I went into a restaurant and the restaurant owner was refusing to serve gay people, I'd never eat in that restaurant again.
Is he coming out?
I wouldn't talk to the I'd talk to the restaurant owner and complain, or I'd go support the gay people, or I'd pass a non-discrimination law. Right. No, I'd never eat in the restaurant again.
Right.
Thank you.
So before we get to, obviously, I think the real reason that these governors are starting to backtrack and getting nervous and stopping to do this is because the corporate world has really gotten on them and said,
no question,
we're not coming to your state anymore. And we're going to get to that, but that's not how.
Well, I don't know. MC Hammer objected.
Okay. And entertainers and politicians and cities said they wouldn't travel there. But before we get to that, it started grassroots in terms of opposition.
Absolutely.
Let's show them the picture of the stickers that businesses started to put up in windows as this thing was passing. They put up stickers that said, "This business serves everyone," and everybody starts putting that up, and that is going to kind of make the right-wing head explode too, because they're going to see most people do support us. They don't want any part of this kind of discrimination.
Except Memories Pizza in Indiana, which was asked whether it would serve pizza to a same-sex wedding. No. We chose to be heterosexual, not homosexual.
Yes, and if you're going home with this pizza to engage in sex outside of marriage, you can't have a pizza either. I mean, come on.
I would like to thank Chris Cuomo on CNN, who has really cross-examined these right-wingers and said, where in your religion does it say that you cannot serve customers? Is that really, what Bible verse are you looking at? So I think, first of all, I think it's been just brilliant. I think we will take a giant step forward. If you're wondering what to do about this, the answer is non-discrimination laws statewide and nationally, a comprehensive civil rights bill that includes lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, that covers public accommodations, employment, housing, education, credit across the board, that does have a religious carve-out that says churches don't, and synagogues and other religious organizations don't have to perform same-sex weddings. We're not looking for that.
All human rights laws have those carve-outs for religion. You know, no human rights law has ever made the Catholic Church start ordaining women, which they should.
And if you have a public accommodation, a business, you cannot in a business refuse to serve certain customers.
Now, staying with the grassroots for a second, before all this really heated up, we have a picture of it, there were 3,000 people who showed up for a protest in Indianapolis. Many of them, you have that picture, many of them non-gay, who showed up for that. Well, there was a big rally at outside the Capitol. Use your imaginations if we can't find the picture.
Maybe we'll get it up there. But it was called on very short notice. It was very spontaneous. And as you say, thousands of people showed up outside the Capitol.
Now, you know, Pence started out accusing the opposition of mischaracterizing the law. And, you know, he just, as you said, he started lying about it. Actually, Mississippi has this law. You know.
Well, after Arizona, after Jan Brewer was convinced to veto a version of this law because businesses came down on her very hard and threatened not to put the Super Bowl in Phoenix and stuff like that, Mississippi actually passed a version of the law, much to our regret and shame.
But they're saying that they report no instances of high-profile denials of service.
Well, you know, a lot of this, and one of the right wing's talking points is, you know, you have these laws in all these states, and there haven't been any instances of blah, blah, blah. And it's about the atmosphere you set.
Sure, of course.
And if you set an atmosphere that says we don't care about discrimination, then who's going to go complain if you think you're going to be rejected and there's nothing to protect you?
Governor Pence has been saying that, you know, discrimination is abhorrent to him. And then when George Stephanopoulos asks him on this week, on Sunday, well, will you protect people on the basis of sexual orientation in your state? I'm not here to talk about that, George. That's not on my agenda. It's not, you bet it's not on his agenda. He has a long record of anti-gay bigotry. He built his career on anti-gay bigotry, on saying that sexual orientation should never be used as a category.
Because those three guys in that picture will destroy any hope he has of running for president, which is what he wants to do. I think that's gone down the drain this week. But that, he has a narrow constituency, and that is his choice. That's why he's caught between a rock and a hard place.
If it's gone down for him, why hasn't it gone? Should it go down for all of the other Republican candidates for president? I think all of them who said they support this bill as written. Let's find out if they support it if it gets fixed. Are they going to oppose it now?
Well, that is what they're going to be asked. They're already being asked about this. They jumped on early to say they supported it, and they supported Pence, but now some of them are backtracking a little.
So are they finished?
We'll see. We'll see how it plays out. I suspect this will be a large topic of conversation in Republican debates. And as they run their campaigns, they are in deep trouble now over these issues, and they are going to have to make a choice. And it's the traditional choice in the Republican Party. Do I play to the small conservative base in these primaries? You know, Iowa, the Christian conservatives in Iowa are not going to be on our side of this.
That's why some candidates skip Iowa.
Exactly. And why Mike Huckabee won it last time and may win it again. But then can they go beyond that to a national campaign? I think Hillary Clinton is sitting at home just chuckling her head off over this.
Well,
it's the best thing that's happened to her.
We have a long list of people who have opposed this law from the White House on down, lots of corporations. But you got to give credit to the early adopters, as we say.
Yes.
People like Salesforce, which canceled their programs that require their employees to travel to Indiana, and then it was obviously cities like San Francisco and things. Eventually, places like New York and everything.
The NCAA was very early because they have the Final Four basketball tournament this weekend in Indianapolis, and their headquarters are in Indianapolis, and they spoke out very quickly. And three of the four Final Four teams have spoken out against against it. Not Kentucky yet has said anything.
Now, and
you'll be happy to know the PGA Tour has also spoken out against the RFRA law.
Well, good. Let's put up that front page from the Indianapolis Star that I think came out on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Fix this now. This was the entire front page of the most important paper in the state, and I think that had a big impact. And at that point, and what they're saying is, all of them, you're wrecking this state. You are wrecking the reputation of the state. They're going to think of us as rubes and bigots and idiots. You've got to stop this. And well, we'll see what he comes up with or has come up with.
I think the other corporation that was in early that made a big, huge difference in setting the tone here was Angie's List.
Absolutely.
And that is CEO of that is a conservative Republican.
Yes, but they were going for a contract for like $100 million, I think, to do an expansion in the city.
Yep.
And they said, that's on hold. Well, that gets your attention. That's real money on the table.
They stepped up early and strong, and they did a great job of stepping up on that. Now all these major corporations. I must say I have a little tinge as I look at this list of corporations, because a lot of these corporations, these banks,
terrible.
They do horrible things in the world.
So does the White House. The White House statement initially was, well, that doesn't seem like it's a step in the direction of equality. Of course, they're pushing the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is going to destroy, equality around the world.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
In Indiana, not only is this going on, but what you haven't seen a lot of press on is that Indiana has just prosecuted and convicted a woman for ordering abortion drugs online. She took the drugs. The baby was either stillborn or not, or died right after. She was prosecuted and is going to jail for 20 years.
That's outrageous.
For taking a perfectly legal abortion drug. 20 years in jail in Indiana
I hope
for
that
this.
goes up to the Supreme Court and is stopped.
Well,
and of course, again, this is not just about. People have to look at what this law could be used for, and people quite seriously said, well, you're no longer going to have to pay interest on your loans in Indiana because usury is forbidden by the Bible, which it is. That used to be part of civil law. The only people who could lend money were Jews. Seriously, in certain cultures.
And of course, some of the most vicious fights take place between various religious sects, and certainly some Christian could say, I don't want to serve Muslims, and this law would protect them.
The hashtag Boycott Indiana became the #1 trender on Twitter. Many celebrities got involved. Early people were people like Stephen King, the band Wilco. Then Ask Me canceled its conference there.
And it's still going on as this compromise is supposedly worked out. Meanwhile, of course, there are cities in Indiana that do have non-discrimination laws, and the Republican mayor of Indianapolis, which does have a law, has spoken up repeatedly and loudly. And the Department of Health of the state of Indiana, meanwhile, was bringing in experts from the Fenway Clinic in Boston, the LGBT clinic, to do training on LGBT inclusion in their services.
Well, what I'm not hearing in this fix is that groups like Freedom Indiana, which is the big LGBT group there, they're not being invited, that I know of, to the table. And they have to be at the table for this, or it's not legitimate.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So we don't know where this is going to end up in Indiana. We are thrilled that this all blew up with no sense that this was going to happen at this level in this way. It's just a blip in the universe that this would happen at this moment.
I hope the governor has gotten beyond thinking this is just a perception problem, and he understands. Is he a lawyer?
Look, he may call it a perception problem, but that's just his cover. He never thought it was just a perception problem, unless he's really an idiot, which of course is possible. But the governor of Connecticut, Dan Malloy, has been fantastic on this and has been all over television saying that Pence knows very well this is not a perception problem. And people are blasting him for this. They are trying to parse the words and say, well, you know, the law doesn't mention LGBT. It's not about that. This law was written specifically because of these, for two reasons. Because of marriage equality in these cases with the florists and the photographers and the bakeries, and because of Obamacare. Pence said directly in his Wall Street Journal op-ed that this law was written so that he, like the Hobby Lobby case, could limit the effects of Obamacare, and he could empower companies like Hobby Lobby not to pay for contraception.
Right.
That's why he's so taken aback, because it didn't have so much to do with the gays for him, aside from things like wedding florists. For him, the real crux of this was Obamacare.
Right. I do just want to talk to our right-wing friends who monitor the show here. Be careful what you wish for if you actually get things like this. I mean, you know, as Molly Ivins, the great Molly Ivins used to point out, you know, Europe was soaked in blood from religious wars. That's what you're really opening up when you do this, when you start to, you know, take away civil rights. And, you know, religious freedom, true religious freedom, which is written in the First Amendment, we totally support, and you've got it. And it's made religion thrive in this country. And you start in with this, you will destroy your own religions.
And I want to point out that you go for someone who you think is more moderate, like a Jeb Bush, who isn't all that moderate. But if he emerges as the supposedly moderate Republican candidate, who do you think he's going to appoint to the Attorney General or the Supreme Court or all these offices? Well, it's going to be these right-wing conservatives.
He's already said he was going to appoint to his circle of foreign policy advisors the same people who got us in the Iraq War.
Bolton and Cheney and all these guys.
All these guys.
Exactly. So really watch out for that.
And I would say to the religions that you are going to lose people to your faiths because you're becoming toxic when you do this stuff. And young people cannot abide this kind of bigotry.
Now, in the other states, because it isn't just Indiana where this bill has been proposed, in Georgia, they proposed this religious freedom bill. They were getting it passed, but a Republican in a committee added an amendment that was a non-discrimination amendment for LGBT. It passed in the committee.
And they said, well, what's the point of passing the bill if we can't discriminate? So now it looks like it's dead.
Postponed, certainly.
Now, you mentioned Arkansas because the Senate did pass it 24-7 there to show you how right-wing the legislature is. And, you know, now it's up to Governor Hutchinson.
Well, they've had great demonstrations there. They've gone and demonstrated against the legislature and shouted shame on you at them. Walmart has demanded the governor veto it.
My sister and niece have been to demonstrations there in Little Rock.
Yeah, so Hutchinson's in the process of trying to narrow the bill. But again, this business of we don't discriminate when you just passed a bill that outlawed any non-discrimination laws.
I love what happened in Montana, where Governor Steve Bullock said, what's happening in Indiana is something that shouldn't be happening in Montana. We don't need laws like this imported into our state. It died 50-50 a vote in the House.
And in North Carolina, the Republican governor there, Pat McCrory, said a religious freedom bill makes no sense. We have no need for that here.
Now, the Virginia bill is
mainly because we have no statewide non-discrimination law, so we don't need a religious freedom bill.
The Virginia bill was set to pass. I don't know if it's changed because of this week's stuff, but it does say you can refuse service if it violates your religious convictions. And of course, we've got a Democratic governor, Terry McAuliffe, who can veto it, but I don't know if it's enough to override the veto.
We'll see.
There.
I think that covers all of this across the nation at the moment.
And if you don't think I know what I'm talking about, Gay City News won first prize in religion this week, again from the New York Press Association, including my reporting and Michael Luongo and Art
Congratulations.
Leonard. Yes, thank you very much. Religion. It drives the Catholics crazy when we win, but we won.
All right, just a reminder, you want to get involved, work for non-discrimination laws in your town, city, state, or nationally.
And since the marriage movement got started with lawsuits, you can sue for discrimination if you were discriminated because you're gay, even if you don't have those protections of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, which would be ideal. You can sue under sex discrimination and take your luck, and it's starting to win.
And as long as you're talking about lawsuits, let's get to our note about the Supreme Court, which on April 28th will be hearing the oral arguments on these same-sex marriage cases from Kentucky, Michigan, Tennessee, and Ohio, considering two questions. Does the 14th Amendment require states to license same-sex couples for marriage? And does the 14th Amendment require states to recognize same-sex marriage is legally performed in other states?
And the arguments that the other side is making, they have filed their briefs, and they're basically, the arguments that they're down to is they're saying it's based on the fact that children are born only to opposite-sex couples, although they let
That's not true. Many lesbians have babies.
Then they acknowledge that gay parents love their kids. See, they're softening what they're trying to say. They say the 14th Amendment does not impose a single marriage view on states. Tennessee says marriage can't be separated from its procreative purpose. And Ohio says, leave it to the democratic process. These gays aren't powerless. They can get this eventually.
Blah, blah, blah. We've heard all this before.
Our side's lawyers have been picked, and we have their pictures.
You may remember a few weeks ago that our side asked the Supreme Court to allow us to have 5 different lawyers argue the cases. The Supreme Court never answered that question. So we went ahead and picked 2 plus the Solicitor General. So
and on the right there, Mary Bonato, who is from Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, the winner of the first same-sex marriage case in the country in Massachusetts.
She also won the first case attacking the Defense of Marriage Act in a federal court in Massachusetts.
She's going to argue question 1, does the 14th Amendment require the states to license a marriage between 2 people of the same sex, the Michigan case and the Kentucky case.
She is spectacular, and it is the most delicious rounding of the circle to have her argue before the Supreme Court on this. We couldn't be happier about that.
Wonderful. And the gentleman there is Douglas Hallward Dreimeyer. He's a former assistant U.S. Solicitor General under the Bush administration, appellate specialist. He's argued before the Supreme Court 14 times. And he's going to argue the question, does the 14th Amendment require the states to recognize valid same-sex marriages from other states?
They will each get half an hour, most of which will be questions from the justices. And the U.S. Solicitor General's office gets another 15 minutes on question 1. So April 28th, those arguments will be available by audio shortly after the arguments are conducted. Never any cameras in the Supreme Court, but audio recordings are released pretty quickly.
Right.
Also in marriage news, a Texas federal judge has banned the state or the federal government from doing what it says it should be done, is using the Federal Marriage and Family Leave Act to cover same-sex couples who are legally married but live in non-marriage states. So he's put it on hold in Arkansas, Nebraska, Louisiana, and Texas.
An encouraging non-binding vote in the U.S. Senate. They introduce a bunch of amendments. Everybody votes. Nothing happens with them. They go to the budget. But this was an amendment to guarantee equal Social Security benefits for same-sex couples, no matter where they live. And
veterans benefits.
All Democrats voted for this, and 11 Republicans. Should I say who they are? Susan Collins of Maine, Mark Kirk of Illinois, Murkowski of Alaska, Rob Portman, who has the gay son in Ohio, Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire, Richard Burr, and Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia, Dean Heller of Nevada, Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, and Bob Corker of Tennessee. I'd say that's progress.
I think it's definite progress, and some of those people are considered quite conservative.
Yes.
So thank you to them, and let's see you step up on votes that actually mean something.
But the biggest, I think, breakthrough is the fact that Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito of Massachusetts, a Republican strong opponent of same-sex marriage, is going to preside over the wedding of Senate President Stanley Rosenberg and his now domestic partner, but soon to be married, Brian Hefner, on April 19th. So people change.
Well, when Charlie Baker, the Republican governor of Massachusetts, asked her to join him on the ticket, he said, you have to soften your opposition to same-sex marriage or I'm not putting you on the ticket. And this is a further softening of her position. And the florist in Washington State who refused to sell flowers to the same-sex couple getting married and refused, when she lost the case, to promise not to do it again, is going to be fined $1,000 and $1 in court costs.
When we went to confession in the Catholic Church, we always had to promise not to do it again.
But I'll bet some people did.
I bet you they did.
Yeah. All right, back to other national news. Congratulations to Aisha Moody Mills, the new head of the Victory Fund. That is the national organization that works to elect LGBT people to public office. She comes from the Center for American Progress. She was a big activist on legalizing same-sex marriage in the District of Columbia. The Victory Fund trains and supports LGBT candidates, including internationally now. You know, they've done some trainings in places around the world.
Eastern Europe.
Colombia. She's worked as a political consultant and a fundraiser for the Congressional Black Caucus, and her being chosen for this position leaves people hopeful that the Victory Fund will diversify its menu of candidates that it supports, using it, you know, hiring an African-American woman, lesbian, to run the Victory Fund.
Let's hope.
I hope so.
Well, who needs them when Fortune magazine has named as the world's greatest leader, and I just wanted to say, first of all, the Pope was fourth. Tim Cook of, you know, Apple. They picked singular leaders with vision, and Cook for his leadership at Apple, but they cited also his coming out as a big leadership thing.
Well, it's Fortune magazine, and Apple is an extremely successful company.
Yes.
So
But they spent half the thing on talking about his coming out.
Okay. All right. In Virginia, the Stafford School Board has backtracked. They had ordered an elementary school to allow a transgender girl to be able to use the girls' room. Parents complained. They changed their mind. She can no longer use the girls' room. Very sad.
In California, Kamala Harris, who was the Attorney General, is asking the High Court in California for relief from certifying the Sodomite Repression Act. Some people think she should just, you know, sort of
Suppression Act. It's the Kill the Gays bill.
Didn't I say suppression?
You said repression.
Suppression Act. Sodomite Suppression Act.
It's actually a shoot the gays bill. It literally...
It says put a bullet in gay people's heads. It actually says that.
Mandates it, yes.
Yes.
So that's what I would call it. I would call it the Shoot the Gays bill. I wouldn't call it the Sodomite Suppression Act.
Well, that's its official title, and she was going to have to come up with one for the ballot.
Yes, she can call it anything she wants. Santa Clara County in California is exploring doing the first county office of LGBTQ affairs. It would monitor social services, assess health disparities, things like that.
It was proposed by Ken Yeager, and it was also supported by a former anti-gay supervisor named Cortese, who turned around on the issue, because people are turning around. People can change.
The Department of Justice is suing Southeastern Oklahoma State University for transgender discrimination under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act because Professor Rachel Tudor, a transgender woman, was denied promotion, tenure. She was fired.
She had a favorable rating from the tenure board, and it's the first time they ever rejected someone. And she had filed a discrimination complaint, and this was regarded as retaliation. I mean, the fact that the Attorney General himself is getting involved, I think we should quote him. He said, "We will not allow unfair biases and unjust prejudices to prevent transgender Americans from reaching their full potential as workers and citizens." That's very nice.
Well, it also is an expansion of the analysis and a putting into practice of the analysis that the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act covers discrimination on the basis of sex discrimination against transgender and transsexual people. And it is also a theory that we are trying to expand to sexual orientation discrimination. And at the same time that we want to pass non-discrimination laws, either an expansion of the Civil Rights Act or a standalone bill, going to court and getting this analysis accepted by the courts is another way to go.
Because it is sex discrimination. We are being discriminated against because we don't fulfill our quote-unquote proper gender or sex roles. In Maryland, a bill advanced in the Senate 37-10 to compel insurance companies to cover lesbian couples' outpatient expenses if they use in vitro fertilization. Now they only do it if you use your husband's sperm. It passed the House already.
It's unbelievable in this day and age that we still have these retrograde laws, but we do.
Well,
in New York State, the new budget, which has good and bad things, good thing is that it doubles funding for homeless youth shelters, although we could use a lot more than that,
yes.
But doubling is a good thing. And
yes, but they didn't raise the minimum wage. They didn't do a ton of things that would have worked for economic justice for all people. It was it was a terrible budget.
Absolutely.
In New York, we got problems here. For those of you watching us there. In the National Black Church Initiative, 34,000 black churches in 15 denominations has cut their ties with Presbyterians over their acceptance of same-sex marriage. The head of the group said that Presbyterians need to repent or over their changing of the Word of God.
You know, ultimately the goal is to understand same-sex attraction as equivalent to and just as normal as opposite-sex attraction. And until we get to that point, we are going to continue to have discrimination and misunderstanding and
people
bad
like this
things.
think we're making a perverse choice.
Yes.
You know, as opposed to acting on our natures.
We've made a lot of progress, but that is the goal, normalization of same-sex attraction.
We haven't made progress in upstate New York. A corrections officer there, Rick, I want to say his name, Pilarski, he had to resign from one prison and he got suspended at the other. He posted on Facebook about the Sodomite Suppression Act. Wouldn't this be the greatest thing in the world? The guys around the corner would be the first two faggots in my sights. And then he says, what you do in your house is one thing, but when you fly flags of equal rights and the rainbow flag in a small, quiet neighborhood is another, and therefore deserve death, is basically what he's saying.
This is why I don't want this law to get as far as the petitioning stage, because it will validate that kind of opinion, it will foment violence, and it will bring people out to sign on officially to the idea of shooting and killing LGBT people.
And how about that David Brooks of the New York Times, the columnist, who said,
disgusting.
We need to be more tolerant of religious bigotry. That's basically what he said in his column. We need to be quiet. We need to tone it down.
He's in favor of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Sad news from Cherry Grove in Fire Island, where a fire destroyed the Grove Hotel, Holly House, and a couple of homes. The Ice Palace is okay, but it's the second time there's been a major fire on Fire Island in the last couple of years, destroying institutions.
And now that the Defense Secretary of the United States has said he's open to transgender military service, anonymous officers are leaking to the press that they're not happy with this.
But the new head, the chair of the Board of Visitors at West Point, the U.S. Military Academy, is Sue Fulton, an out lesbian activist who was in the class of 1980 at West Point, one of the co-founders of Nights Out, the gay alumni group from West Point, and on the board of OutServe. The Board of Visitors is the group that oversees West Point, and she is now the chair of the board.
Well, how do you think this measures up to that? The new president of the student body at Notre Dame is an out gay person.
Wow.
I don't have the name. I couldn't find it. But,
and the fathers are tolerating that? Amazing. Yeah. But in Converse, Texas, a Boy Scout has put up a big Change.org petition because his lesbian moms were kicked out as leaders of the Boy Scout troop. He's about to deliver 125,000 signatures to the Boy Scouts saying, you know, we're glad you got rid of the rule forbidding gay scouts, but come on, my moms can't be leaders. Let's see. We don't have a ton of time. Shall we do the Anise Parker thing? That's a little long. That's about 5 minutes, and we have about 10, so maybe we shouldn't.
It's wonderful, and it'll be in our email. The link to it will be in our email. A heartwarming story of Anise Parker and how her whole family came together.
Her wife, her adopted kids. It's really wonderful. It's a local news report. Congratulations to them for doing it. Write to andyhum@aol.com to get the link to that. Really, really good.
Or Google it.
Yeah. All right, international news.
I think one of the big news this week is coming from Italy, where a Senate committee passed a civil union bill 14 to 8 to 1. So that's making progress. Not marriage, but civil unions. And Italy is a laggard in human and gay rights. Yeah,
the big international story, of course, was the Germanwings plane that went down. And we were sad to read that an Australian gay man, Greg Friday, 29, an engineer and volunteer at the Victoria AIDS Council, was one of the ones.
And his mother.
They lost their lives on the plane.
He taught kids how to overcome homophobia and celebrate sexual identity. His mother was a nurse and midwife for 40 years. It's all tragic, but we try to put a human face on this thing.
Yeah, and of course there's a lot of slime online about the pilot and, gay rumors and stuff, but really he was a guy with mental illness who...
Horrible, inexplicable.
Terrible story.
Our friends from the Jamaica anti-homophobia stand, they greeted the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Portia Simpson Miller, at a New York church and really, let her have it. And she got very defensive and walked out because she won't bring a conscience vote on getting rid of the anti-sodomy laws as promised.
Yeah, she did promise that when she ran for office. Not that I have any confidence that in Jamaica they're going to pass a non-discrimination law.
But if you say you're going to do something, do it.
Well, what she should do is be more active in educating the public against the rampant homophobia and really getting behind a public education campaign and better actions by the police who are out there hurting gay people.
Yes.
And by the way, President Obama is going to Jamaica for a meeting of Caribbean countries, mostly around trade issues, and it would be nice if he said something to her while he was there.
You should just sit there in the meetings and go, gay, gay.
The debate we hope for on same-sex marriage in Australia has been postponed. No free vote allowed for the Liberals. But a leading Catholic lobbyist who's against the law recently attended his daughter's same-sex wedding in New Zealand, where it's legal. And when asked whether he had changed his mind, he said, "No, I'm still against same-sex marriage."
He likes a good party. When they surveyed the Irish 20 years ago on this about same-sex marriage, people were against it. But when they asked them, "Would you go to the party if your son or daughter got married?" "Oh, I'd go to the party, of course." A party? Not gonna miss that. Japan is having a party. A Tokyo award is the first to grant recognition to same-sex partners, giving equivalency to marriage. But the conservative government may have some reaction to that.
And in Malta, they have passed a very progressive gender identity and expression non-discrimination law that allows gender identification change without proof of surgery. You can just get a notarized affidavit, and it's a non-discrimination law, too. So thank you, Malta. AIDS news?
Back home in Indiana. A health emergency was declared by Governor Mike Pence because there were 80 HIV cases in rural Scott County. So it forced Governor Pence to allow needle exchange, which they still don't have, but only for 30 days. Now, this rural outbreak of HIV, because people use a particular drug, I guess it is. What is it?
Opana.
Yeah, is spreading around the country.
It's a stronger form of oxycodone or whatever. It's oxymorphone. You crush it up, you moisten it, you inject it. And people, they're living in an impoverished rural area. They have very little hope, and they're addicts.
It reminds me of Eastern Europe, where that's how HIV was spread there.
They do have companies and employment in that area. Okay. Also, Kentucky is legalizing needle exchange for some of the same reasons. In New York State, ACT UP held a demonstration against Governor Cuomo this week because he put together this whole blueprint to end AIDS and had all these activists on the panel and all these great plans. He hasn't released it. He's refused to release the blueprint they came up with.
Well, Ann and I live in Chelsea, which has 6 times the syphilis rate of any other place in the city, of the rest of the city, I'm sorry, and the highest HIV rates. And they just closed the health clinic here from the Department of Health because it's falling apart and they need to renovate it, but they're not putting anything downtown. Yeah. And there are a lot of so there are other options for you folks, but don't stop getting tested. Get those tests. Go to GMHC, go to, Callan Lord, go where you need to go, but get those tests.
The CDC has announced a new program of $185 million for prevention and treatment for men who have sex with men, and particularly men of color. But that money is stretched over 3 or 4 years in these programs, so it's not a lot. But it's new for the CDC to really target these populations.
And a new study on PWA says that they age 14 years faster, and it says that this is a big study from UCLA and a multi-center on AIDS. They think HIV accelerates aging, not the drugs themselves, but that you take for it, and now they want to look at mitigating those effects.
We always knew that.
Well, this was quantifying.
All right, entertainment news. A couple of quick notes before you review the Heidi Chronicles.
Which you always knew was not a good play.
I sure did, because I saw the original. The Walking Dead has a gay couple on it. Michael Sam is a bad dancer on Dancing with the Stars. Little Big Town, a country group, has a new song called Girl Crush, but it's sort of a bait and switch. It's really about a woman who's jealous of her ex-boyfriend's new girl, but it's a great song. And you might want to see Effie Gray this weekend, the new movie written by Emma Thompson and starring her, that's about this girl, Effie Gray, marries John Ruskin.
The artist and critic.
Who anomalous sexuality, may be gay, doesn't consummate the marriage. Effie Gray, take a look at that. And what about the Heidi Chronicles?
Well, I missed it in '89 when it came out.
That must be what I saw.
It won the Tony and it won the Pulitzer for Wendy Wasserstein.
Bad.
But it's starring Elizabeth Moss now. God, I can't see what all the fuss was about this play. It was really bad sitcom writing with offensive stereotypes of women, lesbians. I thought she was supposed to be giving voice to her generation, but no way. Elizabeth Moss's acting is also pretty flat. It does, I have to say, you wouldn't have made it till the second act, but it does pick up a little bit when she gets a little bit more serious in the second act. But that's a lot to ask in a 2.5-hour play.
I didn't like it when I first saw it for exactly those reasons, so I feel confirmed. I'm happy that you didn't like it. But you're about to go to London and see, I hope, some better theater.
Good stuff.
Have a good time.
On the horizon. New play by Tom Stoppard, new play by David Hare, and some little things. I'm seeing Our American Cousin, which Lincoln was watching while he was shot.
Be careful!
It's a very important play, by the way. It's where we got the expression, there are no small roles, only small actors.
And it's also where we got the expression, but how did you like the play, Mrs. Lincoln? Chris Cooper will be here next week. I'll be here. I'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.